So as we've read this week in Acts, kind of where the focal point that I was going to try to zero in on was out of the 24th chapter, the 25th verse, where it's talking of Paul and Felix. And it says there, as he, Paul, reasoned of righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come, Felix trembled and answered, Go thy way, for this time, when I have a convenient season, I will call for thee. He hoped also that the money should have been given him of Paul, that he might loose him. Wherefore he sent for him the oftener and communed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus came into Felix's room, and Felix, willing to show the Jews a pleasure, left Paul bound. So, as I was reading through these chapters this week, if there was a thought that kept ringing in my head and a focal point, a common theme, a common thread, if you will, that I saw linking so many of these descriptions and occurrences, it was simply this: idols. What idols do we have in our life that keeps us from coming to Christ? What idols do we have that keep us from serving Christ as we ought to, that keep Christ from having the preeminence? Oftentimes we look at this and say, well, it's a question of a person's salvation, and that is most certainly true. That is a correct understanding and an interpretation of here as we look at it in this example of Felix. That is certainly the problem that Felix is facing, whether to convert to Christianity or to serve the idol of self-importance, of wealth, of power, of fame, because he was a man of prominent position, and yet he feared the Jews. Why did he fear the Jews? Because he didn't want an unrest. He didn't want an unrest. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want a disturbance. Well, why was that important? Why would he care if he's in charge? Well, it's like so many other things. The boss has a boss. And the boss's boss didn't care what he did as long as it didn't cause him a headache. And if he started having rebellions on his hands, uprisings, people in the street, then Caesar has to send in troops, and Caesar can't use those troops to do whatever it is that Caesar wants to do with them because he's too busy putting down a rebellion. So the boss had to worry about his boss, and these Jews were threatening civil unrest, and he's like, well, I can't afford to rock the boat. So that was his idol. And it prevented him from coming to know Christ. And yet, though, even as believers, what idols do we have that keep us from putting Christ first, from Christ having the preeminence? And folks, the answer to that question is different as many of us as are in this room. Our idols are different. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what that idol is. What we're going to try to spend some time on is noticing the symptoms if you have an idol. Even though the idols may be different, for some it may be pride, for some it may be pleasure. Their idols themselves may be different, but the things that they all share in common are the ways that they make us behave when it comes to Christ. Okay? So we see this example here with Felix and how he acted. But if you compare that to how Paul acted and behaved when he was in situations and circumstances, you're going to find a vastly different behavior. Here, Felix was like, oh man, I don't want to cause trouble. I might lose my position of power. I'm so worried. No, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. But compare that to Paul when he's on trial, when he's being questioned. We see in the 21st chapter of Acts, the 13th verse, Paul gives this. He says this, Then Paul answered, what mean ye to weep and to break mine heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. And when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, the will of the Lord be done. Put these verses into context. A prophet had come and said, Paul, the Lord has told me you go to Jerusalem is bad. This is how Paul gets into this whole Felix mess, okay? This whole Felix situation. He's warned of it. The Spirit has said, Paul, you go to Jerusalem, you're going to be arrested. And the people looked at him and they were sorrowful about this. They said, Paul, don't go. But Paul said, this is what the Lord would have me to do. And if I go and I get arrested, I get arrested. If I'm in jail, I'm in jail. If I suffer, I suffer. If I die, I die. It doesn't matter because it's what Christ would have me to do. And when he took that stance, the people said, you're right, Paul. And if you're in prison, we will pray for you. And if you die, we will miss you. But put Christ first. See, the great irony of things is, folks, and we're not talking about fanaticism here. Okay? We're not talking about this mindlessness of where you just rush forward to danger, heedless of what it does. That's not what Paul was doing. Paul, he even said at one point that he was conflicted. He's like, I want to go to heaven. Heaven is where Christ is. But I want to stay here. There's work to be done. There's people that I love. I'm torn. And so I say, Christ, you want me here? I'm here. You want me home? Take me. It's not fanaticism, folks. It is an understanding of priorities. It's prioritization. And it is necessary in a Christian life to understand those priorities and to make sure things are in alignment with the priorities. If your priorities are out of whack, life is bad. Okay? I'll give you an example. And we know this to be true instinctually, and yet we let it suffer and we let it decay, and it corrupts our worldview, it corrupts our lives, it causes us problems. I'll give you an example. Everybody remembers the housing crisis of 2008. People losing their homes. And I never will forget, I had the news on, and they were talking about it, and this kind of goes to illustrate why I have such a problem with the media, because I thought, guys, what you are doing is insanely heartless, but you're doing it for ratings. But they were actually videoing a family getting evicted. I mean, they were literally on the front steps of their home, and people were carrying stuff out the front door. And this man was sitting there on his front steps with his head in his hands, weeping because he had lost everything. And I felt so sorry for that family. I felt so sorry for that man, but not for the reason that most people think. Most people, and the way that the media was portraying is this person lost everything. It's such a tragedy. It's such a circumstance of just somehow beyond their control. And where I felt sorry for him was the fact that they could not see, that they did not understand prioritization. What do you mean? He's sitting there with his head in his hands. He's got this thick gold chain around his neck. He's got a cell phone clipped to his side. And his wife's behind him, and during the entire segment, she's like Puff the Magic Dragon, one cigarette right after the other. Stop smoking, cut the cell phone plan, go hawk that gold chain and go to the bank and say, here, this is all the money I've got in the world. Give me a few more days and I will bring you all the money I've got in the world again. I will do whatever it takes to keep a roof over my head, because keeping a roof over the head of my children is more important than my cell phone plan, is more important than our cigarettes, is more important than our bling, is more important than any of those other things that I might have had in the home. If I don't have food and I don't have a roof over my head, life is bad. Okay, so see, we understand a certain degree of prioritization. But the thing that is more important than food on my table, clothes on my back, roof over my head, is the eternal state of my soul. What shall it gain a man? What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? What does it matter? If I put food in your belly and clothes on your back and slap you on the back and say, I love you, and send you on your way, yes, you feel good, I feel good, but if you're lost, what have I done for you? Have I done anything? Truthfully. There is a higher order of prioritization. And idols will divert you from that. Idols want to put number two as number one. Satan is glad for that. If he can get you to focus on number two instead of number one, he's perfectly satisfied. Because what went from 1 to 2 will not stay in the 2 slot very long. When Christ goes to number 2, he doesn't stay there very long. He'll soon go to 3, 4, 10, 15. Jesus who? So some of the hallmarks that we see when lack of idols in our life is we understand that prioritization. And when we put things in their proper place, when we put Christ in his proper place, put him in the proper place of our life, our behaviors act different. We act different. Notice in that 21st chapter, you go down just a few verses, and Paul has gone up to Jerusalem, and it says there in the 24th verse, well, let me back up there. He says in the 23rd verse, 22nd, 23rd verse. They've got a few men here that are going to be taking some Jewish vows, and the Jews of the city are telling Paul, you need to show the people that you are a Jew, that you're not some pagan Gentile. And they're encouraging him to take this Jewish vow, to show his Jewishness, if you will. And they admonish him here he says, them take these 4 men and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Excuse me. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law in this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and hath polluted this holy place. So because Paul said, okay, I will meet you as far as I can meet you, O Jews. Remember, he said in his own writings that if he could, he would damn his own soul if it would save his people. I would that I were accursed, that they might be saved, that all of Israel might be saved. God, damn me to hell if it will but save my people. So Paul said, fine, I'll do all this. I'll shave my head. Man, I don't know. That's a road right there, Paul. I don't know that I could go cue ball. And Major, if you want to encourage Brady along that lines, do as the Lord leads. I don't know, though. I don't know that I could have went that far. But he did. I'll go to make peace because Christ is more important to me than my dignity, than my hair. That I might reach these people is more important to me than some vows or rites or ordinances or whatever. And yet, contrast it with them. The way these folks acted, they looked at him and when they found Paul in the temple trying to make peace, they created an uproar and said, oh, this man, this is the dog who is bringing Gentiles into the house of the Lord that they may know Christ. How dare he? See the difference? See the idol that's there. Oh, we can't have these dog Gentiles become of the faith. That doesn't make us special anymore. See, what the Jews had done is one of their particular idols is we're the children of God. And they began to take pride in that, and they got their eyes off of it's not that we are children of God. It's that God chose us when He didn't have to. Folks, in all rights, He should not have. I do not understand God's patience with me, but He has it anyway. And instead, they sit there and they thumped their chest and said, look at me. Look how special I am that God chose me, never remembering the words that Jehovah spoken to them. Oh, Israel, you were weak. You were despised. And I reached down and picked you up. What in the world did you have And folks, we are in that same miserable condition. And pride, being that idol, says take your focus off of Christ and put it on you. And idols will protect themselves. Okay, you have to know this about yourself. You have to understand this about your character. And folks, if this makes you uncomfortable, if you think that I am telling you that you are a wicked, evil person, that you are a reprobate, that you would attack Christ, then yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. I'm glad we're on the same page, because you are. So am I. My idols will fight tooth and claw to get rid of Christ, to pull him down one peg. I have to be aware of that in my own heart and say, God, help me put you first. So that Paul, in the 22nd chapter, he begins to give the account of all that had happened there. And he said that when it came to pass that when I, Paul, was coming into Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance and saw him, Christ, saying unto me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And they didn't do it. They didn't accept him. They did exactly what Christ said. Because it says in just a few verses later in the 22nd verse, then lifted up their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. See what that idol is doing there? You got to get rid of Paul, because Paul says, put Christ first. Away with him. Away with him. Kill him. Get rid of him. Silence him. You're bothering my conscience here, Paul. You got to go. This was not lawful for them to do. This was not in accordance with Mosaic law. You see, that's what an idol will do. It'll make you a hypocrite. Look in the 23rd chapter, they get Paul and they drag him in front of the chief priest. And folks, we have seen this before play out in biblical history. If this doesn't remind you of the scene of Christ, read more and it will. But when he's brought before Ananias, and the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Acts 23, second verse. Then said Paul unto him, God shall smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? Ananias was a hypocrite. Oh, Paul, I'm going to drag you up here because you haven't followed the jot and the tittle of the law. Go over and smack him around some. Wait a minute. Where do you read that in Mosaic law? That we met out punishment before we have a verdict that you're guilty until proven innocent? No. See, Ananias didn't care, because that was protecting his idol of prominence and position. And these guys even get more extreme, so that when you read down just a few more verses in the 23rd chapter, when you get down to the 12th verse, you find people who are taking vows. We're not going to eat until we have killed Paul. Oh, so we're vigilantes now. I guess I missed that in the Mosaic law. Was that, I mean, I know Leviticus is kind of dry reading. Was that in there? Was that like Leviticus 54th chapter? Did somebody drop a chapter and we didn't pick it up in our new version? Is that a translation thing? No, it's just not there. And so their logic and their reasoning is like this: we're going to kill Paul. Is that against the law? That doesn't matter if it's against the law. Well, why are you going to kill Paul? He broke the law. So you're going to kill someone which is against the law for breaking the law. So when you get done, are you committing suicide? Because I'm a little, because doesn't that make you worthy of death? Because you're breaking the law. And I don't know, it seems like it could be questionable whether or not Paul broke the law, because you're talking about him, things that he has said, but killing someone's pretty clear. That's very well defined. They're either alive or they're not, so it's very clear you're breaking the law. But the idol don't care, because the idol's not about you keeping the law. The idol is about you serving the idol. And the idol loves it, laughs at it when you break God's law in service to it. So whether it's your pride, whether it's your envy, your jealousy, your lusts, whatever, it will make a hypocrite of you. I know people who become incensed if someone lies to them, and yet they lie all day long. Why? Because they're not about God's law. They're about themselves, and their idol is their self. So you got to understand that. It's not about honoring God's law and that it's so awful to lie. It's that you lied to me. Or you stole from me. You disrespected me. Okay? It's not about whether or not we're polite to each other or rude to each other and how bad it is to be rude to someone, because it's perfectly okay if I'm completely rude to you and disrespectful to you, but oh, don't you dare disrespect me. What? That's an idol. And the idol will make a hypocrite of you. So that's one of the things that you need to be aware of and to look for in yourself. Ask yourself these questions. Husbands, if it's not okay for your wife to be late getting ready to go somewhere, then don't be late coming home from work. If it's not okay, it's not okay. Wives, if it's not okay for your husband to be messing around on the TV while you're trying to talk to him, then wives, don't be messing around on your phones if your husband's trying to talk to you. It's either okay or it's not okay. And if those situations exist, you might need to look at them and say, is there an idol involved here? Am I putting myself above Christ? Maybe. The other thing that an idol can't do is it can't stand the truth. Idols do not like the truth. We see this start playing out so much through all of these trials and courtroom mockeries that Paul goes into. He challenged them there in the 24th chapter. He says, so they bring him up, they've got him on trial here, and he comes back and he says there in the 12th verse, he says, they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, neither in the synagogue nor in the city, neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. In other words, Paul's saying here, guys, they have brought me into court and have charged me with things that they don't even have proof that I've ever done, and yet they want me gone. Why is that? Because the truth pricked at their hearts. And the only way that they could deal with the truth is with lies. Idols can't stand the truth. And if you find yourself twisting things to make it fit the way you want it to, you might have an idol. You might have an idol on your hands. Have you ever seen a generation of people, as we are now, who twist things? And folks, twisting is iniquity, okay? That's what iniquity means, to twist things. Have you ever seen it how so much that we twist things to fit what we want as opposed to the truth? I don't like to stir into popular culture too much because I like to deal with us. But this is an issue that I don't think anybody is struggling with. So maybe by taking that context, we're maybe a little more prone to hearing what I'm trying to say. But I'll give you an example. This whole transgenderism, XYZ, 59 flavors of gender. What is that if not trying to twist something into the truth that simply isn't? I don't care if you feel like a girl. If you were born a certain way, God made you a guy. It just is. I could tell you all day long that I'm one of the little people from The Wizard of Oz. And even if I start talking like this, we represent the Lollipop Guild. No matter how long I sing that, it don't make it so. And I can do I did a fair impersonation of the Lollipop Guild. And even if I start walking like this all day, it still doesn't make it so. I'm not one of the little guys from Wizard of Oz. It just isn't. But that's what an idol will do. It'll twist it to make up, down, down, left, right, sideways, until at the end of the day, you'll find yourself justifying all sorts of ungodliness. Folks, it blows my mind that today in this country we will have women, okay? And ladies, I'm sorry, but I hold you to a little higher standard than I do men. I could expect some of this stupidity and callousness from men, but it blows my mind that we have women who will stand up and with all vitriol say, "Give me the right to kill my babies. That's my right. I want that." And I think to myself, oh my God in heaven, how far have we fallen when a mother won't even have that sort of tenderness toward her child? Men are cold, men are hard-hearted, men are despicably far from God at times, but now when our women have gotten to that point, see what our idol has done? It's twisted the truth into a lie, and it destroys because it has pulled people away from Christ. And once again, in the 25th chapter, we see it again. In the 7th verse, "And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove." More lies, more twisting, more bowing down at an idol. And folks, we may think of this and say to ourselves, man, this is a hard road. And it is. It is a hard road. I would encourage us, though, to remember that the way of the transgressor is hard. So, folks, I would rather be living a life that's trying to put Christ first than to be living like these people, okay? Remember that. But nonetheless, it is hard to serve Christ. But Christ encouraged us. Remember his words from the 5th chapter of Matthew, that blessed Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And what would go on to show is, so did they persecute the prophets, so would they persecute the apostles, so have they persecuted the saints, so have they persecuted my captain, my king, my prince, my savior. And if they did that to a green tree, they'll do it to me, they'll do it to you. But take heart, for greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So be encouraged in that, because your idol won't just fight back within you. Your idol will encourage others to promote itself within you. You think people that don't know Christ are going to listen to Christ telling them how to behave? No. And do you think your idol has no communion with the powers of darkness? No. But don't you ever forget that God is with you each and every step of the way. And when he said he would work all things for those who love him and are called according to this purpose, that he'll work it for good, he meant all things. He is smarter than that old booger, the devil, and he laughs at him because he will actually take what he does. Satan will put things in your path to hurt you, thinking they're going to hurt you, and God is saying all along, that's just great. I'm glad you did that, Satan. Save me the trouble. I'll turn it around, and it'll be for their good. You may say, how? How does God do that? Paul is being persecuted. He is suffering. Look at the good Paul did. We're talking about it this morning, almost 2,000 years later. Do you not think Paul is rejoicing and saying, I am so thrilled, so glad God let me go through that, because the name of Christ can be uplifted because of it. God worked it to his good. He'll work it to yours. Trust him. Try him. I found it to be true. So will you. Just as our idol will make us a hypocrite, just as our idol will make us a liar, our idols will make us cowards. We saw this with Felix. Felix was a coward toward the Jews. Festus was the same in that 25th chapter. As we moved on down just a few verses to the 9th verse, Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me? Festus wouldn't let him go either, because why? He was afraid of the Jews. The idol makes him a coward. Contrast that with Paul, which when we read that in the 21st verse, he said, I'm willing to die. In the 25th verse, he goes on to say, if I've been an offender or I've committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. Paul said, kill me, it doesn't matter. What matters is, do I serve Christ? That's the number one priority. And right now, this situation is demanding a confrontation, a resolvement, whether it's I'm going to follow the things of the world or the things of Christ, so I'm going to follow Christ. Do whatever you got to do. I'm not afraid. For God's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Remember that, cherish that, chew on that, take that into your soul. And just by the way, that wasn't Matt speaking, that was 2 Timothy. See, idols, the Spirit of God gives us, remember what Timothy said there. We don't have a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Idols won't do that. Idols are irrational. Okay? Idols are irrational. 26th chapter, the 9th verse. I verily thought, Paul speaking, I verily thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth, which thing I also did in Jerusalem. And many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. When they were put to death, I gave my voice against them, and I punished them oft in every synagogue, and compelled them to blaspheme, and being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto strange cities. Paul gives a testimony of the idol that was in his life. And he said, it made me mad. Not mad angry, mad insane. Paul said, I went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs going after Christians. Why? Because he had an idol. But this is what Christ does. And Christ says this in his own words. If you look just a little bit down, a few verses till we get to the 18th verse, Christ is speaking of how he is going to impact the Gentiles. And he says to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me. See, Christ opens our eyes. And it's sound, it's logical, it's reasonable, it's rational, it's filled with love and courage and hope and peace and joy and kindness and mercy and grace and soberness and prioritization and long-suffering. I can keep going and going and going. And it is that perspective shift that we've been spending so much time talking about. That's what that opening the eyes is. It's, I see things differently. And the world won't get it. Many people won't get it. Many people will be like Agrippa here in this 26th chapter. Or many people will be like Festus. Festus looked at it and said, Paul, you've gone crazy. No, Festus, you're the one that's gone crazy. You're cowering in fear, walking on eggshells. You won't accept the truth. Who's the crazy one? Agrippa looked at it and said, I'm almost persuaded. I'm almost there. You know, a question I had when I was studying this, what is the difference between a man who says, I never want anything to do with this Christ, away with him, I hate him, I despise him, get rid of him? What's the difference between that man and the man who is like Agrippa and says, I'm almost persuaded? And from a certain point of view, you know what my answer came out to be? Nothing. They're both going to split hell wide open. Being almost persuaded did him no good. Being almost convinced that we need to tear the idols down in our life does us no good. We must commit ourselves to putting Christ first if you treat that as an afterthought, if you say, oh, yeah, I put Christ first. Be careful. Remember, idols can't stand the truth. So what do? They lie. Oh, yeah, you're doing good. Ain't nobody, no Christian's better than you. You're perfect. Be careful. Be careful. Does anyone have any questions? Any comments? Folks, I know I've said this before, or I think I have. My wife will tell me if I'm wrong either way. And God bless her for it. But this is your class. This is here. Everything that I'm trying to do is to help you draw closer to Christ. If you have a question, if you walk in that door Sunday morning and you have a question or a struggle or a trial, folks, that's what's important. Those are my notes. They're gone. That's important. But you just spent 5 or 6 hours on that. I don't care. I want you closer to Christ. Whatever we have to do, that's what we do. If it means sitting me down and getting somebody else, I don't care. Getting you closer to Christ that's what's important. So don't ever feel ashamed or backwards or whatever. If you have a question about what I've said, we will talk through it. If you have a question on something else, I'll do that. You put me to the test. I've done it before, I'll do it again. I don't care. It's not what's important. What is important is we have friends and family and loved ones that are dying and going to hell, whose lives are being destroyed in front of us. That's what's important. We need to get them off that road. And I can't do that, neither can you, but we know the one who can. And we need to let him live in us to show them. So if Lord willing and nothing changes, once again, not completely thinking through actions, next week I'll focus in on Acts, the 27th chapter, verses 11 and 25, and Acts 26, the 28th chapter, verses 26 and 27. And kind of the thought that the Lord is impressing on my heart is believing God. Not believing in God, but believing God. Folks, I appreciate your time and your patience. Thank you.